afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you back. So this week we're going to use some ready-made resources. So I want you to go to this folder here. So you need to open a browser, Safari, Chrome, Edge, whatever you use, and type in this line here, https://tinyurl.com/cpeters2021. And I will copy and paste it into the chat so you can just click on it from there as well. And then within there I want you to find the folder Year1 Graphics and download both files and start up After Effects. So I'll give you a little while for all that to happen. So, tinyurl.com/cpeters2021, and that will take you to this folder here. Try and move it around so you can actually see. Need more space. I'm still working on a Windows laptop and still trying to work out how to use the Windows laptop, you'll notice. Okay, so that will take you to this folder here, CAD Workshops 2021. And in there I put generally the teaching resources that I'm using for a session will go in there. So Year1 Graphics, and there is what we're using today, these two files. And there's also a folder with lots of sort of general purpose resources. So often if you want something like brush strokes or some sort of effect or colour grade or something, we haven't used them yet, but as we start to work through Premiere Pro, you might think, oh, I really want some gritty film footage or something. There's lots of stuff stored in here that you can just drop in and out of. Have a look, see if there's anything you need in there. Everything in here is copyright free. I've already checked everything off, so you can pick from here and use stuff in your own work as much as you like. So that's the workshop folder. So today we're looking in Year1 Graphics, and in there are two files. There is galaxy.ai, which is an Illustrator image document, and kinetictypevox.wav, which is an audio file. So download both of those. It's going to start with the Galaxy file, the Illustrator document. So if you find that, if you double click on it, it will open it in Illustrator. Hopefully, and here's the one I did earlier, so I'm just going to get rid of that. Okay. So this is a ready-made document that you could use straight in After Effects. I've given you this just so you can see how things work within After Effects, how things line up. So I've got an image here, which is a background image, just made up of lots of layers. You've all used Illustrator, so you know how that works. Everything is just all there, and it's grouped and makes one layer. And then I've got two objects. There's a rocket object and a space station object. And again, they're just some layers and groups. So very simple shapes. And hopefully you'll see that can be very effective in After Effects. So the first one is going to be our background image, and you'll notice it's square, even though our background is not going to be square, it's going to be monitor shaped landscape. And that's because we're going to rotate it around a centre point. And then the other two objects are just going to come in and be animated by themselves. So there are different ways to export from Illustrator. We could import the whole Illustrator file straight into After Effects, or we can save them as assets, as PNG assets. So we're going to do that mostly because it's easier for the computer to work with if they're smaller files. So if we go to Window, Asset Export, that opens up this file here, this panel here, and then I can select my various assets and just drag them straight onto the panel. And nothing happens. There we go. There we go. And I can make sure all three are selected. And down here I can choose Export. And then I've already made a folder for these, but if you haven't got one, obviously you haven't got one because you didn't do the morning's one, you can make a new folder and just give it a name and then put your stuff in there. And it's exported. So if I go and find my folder, here it is, Space Assets, and it's got a folder within it that's got my documents in there. So we've talked a lot about last week about setting up a project so that you can find everything, so that everything's in the right place and so on, and how important that is with After Effects and Premiere because they don't save your work, they only save the project outline, they don't save your actual footage. So the next thing we're going to do before we go into After Effects is make a new folder and give it a name. So I'm going to call mine Space Project. And then I'm going to put all my stuff in it. So there's my assets and there's my galaxy. And now when I set up my project in After Effects, I'll be able to use this folder and everything will get stored within there. Okay, so next I'm going to open After Effects. There we go. So I'm going to make a new composition, so click on Composition. And you'll probably have the presets left over from last week, so if you have, just go with that HDTV 1080. Make sure you check square pixels so that things don't come in all weird and squashed. Go to OK. And now we're going to save this into our project folder just to make sure that everything is going in the right place. So File, Save As, find my folder on the desktop, Space Project, give it a name. I can just go back and check, and there it is, there's my assets, my original document and my After Effects project. Okay, so now I'm going to double click in the project manager and it really should automatically find this for me, but for some reason it isn't, so I'm going to go and find my folder and find the assets and import the folder. And if I drop it down, you can see I've got the three assets coming there. I'm going to start with the background. I'm going to drag that and drop it down onto the timeline. And I want to rotate the background. I want to make it so that it moves around like a sort of like a horoscope type thing. So the first thing I'm going to do is drop all the transform information and scale it up. So just scroll on the scale thing there so that it's bigger than my window. Now I'm going to animate the rotation so that it spins around. I've got the timeline right at the beginning. I'm going to keyframe the rotation on using the icon. And I'm going to move towards the end of my project, my workspace. And I'm going to rotate it right around. There, that was it. Okay, so bear in mind you've got two sets of numbers in rotation. You've got number 1, or the number 0 there, and then you've got another number here. The first one is how many times you're spinning it, and the second one is the degree of spin. So if you're going to type 360 degrees, type in the second one, not in the first, or it will spin 360 times in like 10 seconds. So you can see now that's rotating. So now what I want to do is scale it in and position it so that you actually get the effect of the planet moving around. And what I want to avoid is just having those black corners. Okay, and you see mine is jumping because it's not really doing much here. I'm just going to talk through the green line and what that means for you. So After Effects is quite a big program and it doesn't like slower computers. It likes a big graphics card and a fast processor, which most of us don't have because we're working on laptops or we're working on computers that weren't sort of made for the purpose. So when this line is fully green, it means all the information has been rendered into its memory and it can just play it straight off. So when the line is fully green, your footage should just play through. When it's not green, it means it's still building that picture, which can take it some time. Now up here you've got a box where you can choose different resolutions for your footage. So full, half, third, quarter even. And you might find you need to drop that right down. It means your image will look terrible. It looks really pixelated, but it will render much more quickly. It's only a representation of what you can see, so it won't affect your final outcome if you're working at a quarter of the resolution. But obviously it doesn't look very good. I'm going to go back up to half. And it's managing that. You can see it went green very quickly. So I've got my rotation. I'm not very happy with it because it's not quite fitting, not quite covering that gap. Okay. So next I'm going to lock this layer because I don't want to pull it around when I'm working on the others. And fold it up. And I'm going to bring in one of the assets. So I've got the space station right there. It's coming very tiny. Putting up my resolution there. I'm going to drop down all the information for the space station, the asset board. And then scale it up a bit so I can see it. And now I want to animate this so that it moves around my image. So I'm thinking I could scale it and reposition it and sort of generally play around with it. I'm going to go to rotation and just turn it a little bit. And I'm going to use a mix of position, scale and rotation. So I've keyframed all three of them on to move it around the project. I can bend the curve a little bit by finding that tiny dot in the handle, very much like Illustrator. I'm going to do the same with, I'm going to lock that one. I'll lock that one and do the same with the other asset on that blue rocket. Now hold on, shift to keep it proportional. I've just realised I've got another rocket on my background, so I've got rockets everywhere now. And drop down its transform panel. Get it to where I want it to start. Keep that. Take them back. I've done them all right at the end there. I can just grab them back. Okay, so keep them at the start. Can move along and keep from the finish. There's a bit of playing around, you can get something quite interesting going on. You can rescale the backgrounds, you can rescale the objects, just have a little play. Okay, so when you're happy with that, we're going to export. So File, Export. You'll need to have opened Adobe Media Encoder and then export as to Adobe Media Encoder. And I should have said, make sure the blue border is around your timeline when you go to Media Encoder. Then check your settings. It takes a while to come through, remember, check settings. H.264, match source to high bit rate, it should do that automatically. And make sure it's going somewhere you want it. So click on the blue writing, check it's going to your folder, and then click the green arrow. Just minimize those. And in my project now I have my video. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is back to kinetic typography. We're going to make a piece of free moving animated text that goes with an audio layer. So I'm going to make this.
Kinetic typography is so last year.
And we're going to use a few techniques to get that. So this is made up of, as well as the background layer, I've got an audio track which has been pre-marked out. We'll look at that in a moment. And then all the other syllables and pieces of writing are all in their own text layer and then animated individually. So that's what we're going to do. I'm just going to close that. Okay, so I'm going to make a new project now. So File, New Project. I'm not going to save my space project because I'm not going to use it again, but you might want to. And make a new composition. And go to OK. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is import the audio file that I'm going to work on. So you downloaded an audio file. I double click in the project window, I can find that and just import it. And I'm going to drag that down onto the timeline. And if I drop down the parameters here, you can see it's got the waveforms for the audio file. We'll look at those in a moment. But first, I want to clip off my track, my workspace, so that it fits to the length of the audio. So I'm going to do that by grabbing this little blue toggle and dragging it all the way back, so it lines up with the end there. And if I go to composition, I can trim comp to work area, and that will just cut it off, so now it all fits in nicely. Okay, so looking at the waveform, so the waveform is just showing you visually the frequency and loudness of any particular part of the audio. We can use that quite easily. Partly we can play through, and as we play through we can hear unseals.
Kinetic typography is so last year.
So you can see where the word is, you can see where kinetic is, you can see visually where these things are. I'm going to use these waveforms to mark out where my text is going to be animated to. So on your keypad you will have a star key or an asterisk key. It might be on your number keypad, and it might be over one of your other numbers, and it looks like this. And that is a shortcut for the marker. So if I find the points at which the speech starts, so R, and use that key, the asterisk key, to mark it. You can see there's a tiny marker there, and if I double click on it, I can come into the comments and just add a clue as to what the word is going to be. I can do the same here. Do all that in one hit. So I'm just going to go all the way along, putting in the words. When that's done, fold that up and lock that layer. Now I'm going to make a background layer to work on, because remember we haven't got a background, it's not really black, it's actually transparent. So go to the timeline, right click and choose New, Solid, and then choose a colour and click OK. I'm going to lock that as well. Next, I'm going to make a new layer for each of my pieces of text. So I'll start with the text tool. I'm not going to worry about the spacing or the font or any of those things yet. I'm just going to put the layers in. So there's my first word. I need to click away from the layer in the timeline so that it's not highlighted. So that when I go back, I can make a new text layer. Click away again. And so on. So I'll have all my wording stacked up, and then next I'm going to arrange where I want them to finish. So I'm going to spend some time just getting them in the right place, so that they're the right font, the right colour, the right style, and I'm going to make all those changes now. There's some ways you can make this a bit easier. You're graphic students, so you will have a much better idea as to how this is supposed to look than I do. But you have an option to view and show the grid, and that helps you and gives you something to line up against. And you can also turn on rulers, so show rulers, and they work in the same way as in Photoshop or InDesign or anything. And that also gives you something you can line up against. I'm just going to visually turn off my background. I don't actually like working with the grid, it makes me feel a bit sick, so I'm just going to turn it off. But I am going to use rulers to work mine out. So my aim is to get all my text to where I want it to finish. The size, the layout, all those things. So it needs to be where I want it to finish. And then we will animate it into place. Okay, so don't forget you can change your font types, you can change the weighting, the spacing, all the things that you would be able to change in InDesign that you're used to using. Those things are in there. You can change the colour and so on. So I'm not going to spend too much time finishing all the writing for this because I can just type in and out of the one I've already made. So when you're happy with where things are going to end up, I'm going to drop down the transforms with them, and we're just going to keyframe the finishing position. So I know that each of these is going to finish where it is. So at the end of my track, I want the word, or word on Rafi, to finish here. So I'm going to keyframe its position, scale, and rotation. Start with R actually, so by the end of R, I want it to be in this position, this scale, and this rotation. And I might want to use opacity as well. Then I can go back to the beginning, think about where R is going to come in, and then animate to that. So, I'm going to select and drag all my keyframes back to that point. And then go back to the beginning and decide where it's going to go to start with. Position. So in my case, I'm just going to drop it down from above. I probably didn't need to do scale and rotation for that, because I'm only dropping it in. Let's move on to kinetic. So kinetic, I might just fade in. It needs to be in by, so if I drop down the transform, I can use opacity. So I want it to be at 100%, so totally opaque by the time it comes in. But at the beginning, I want it to be invisible. Okay, I'm not really happy with the way it comes in. I think it comes in too early. So again, I can grab a keyframe and I can just drag it around until I get what I want.
Kinetic.
I'm just going through with all of them and building up.
Kinetic.
Until I get what I want. So if I come back to
kinetic typography is so last year.
It's kind of finished version. Okay, so that's your first piece of kinetic typography. And when you've finished, export it. And then you've made a second thing today.